mean, you kind of knew what was coming. Like, this was going to be his first chance to talk about what went down, specifically with Washington. They're on a plane to Detroit to interview him at the end of the season. I believe he sent a text, is the story, that like, hey, thanks but no thanks. Like, I'm happy here. And that pissed a lot of people off over there in Washington, over there in DC, man. Like,
right. We heard that very
some
clear.
of the fallout from that was very weird and odd. Like, a bitter, I don't know, guy that got rejected. That's kind of the vibes that were coming out there. But anyway,
like, this doesn't happen, this shouldn't happen, kind of thing. And it's like, well, maybe it should happen. But anyway, go ahead.
My thing was like, if you're Washington and you're trying to prove to everyone that, oh, this isn't the same old, Washington organization, we're different, we got new ownership, and you're just like pouting to everyone that will listen about why you didn't get your guy and like, all this other stuff, trying to like drag him through the mud. Oh, that was kind of weak. I don't really think that helps the image that you're trying to change a little bit, but that's just me. But anyway, back to Ben Johnson. He was asked, when did you know you were going to stay? And he mentioned on the plane ride back to Detroit after that NFC Championship loss in San Francisco, he remembered a speech by Dan Campbell. I think he said 2021. So he went back, a couple of years there. And just the analogy he made, like, we're going through some rough waters right now. We're in the Arctic, we're hitting icebergs. We're what were they? They start off like 10-1 or something like that.
Well, yeah, we talked to him about maybe they'll go winless like on week 5, and he was like, "You all need to shut up. I don't want to hear that." Like, and we're like, "Sorry, this is Detroit." Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So they got off
that
winless start that year, and I guess during that time, Campbell's message was consistent, and like that's kind of how we know him to be. He's always going to have that even keel mindset, even when things aren't going their way. But he made that analogy, like, we just got to get through the storm. The Caribbean's ahead of us. We can see sunlight. This is going to pass. Like, we'll be just fine. And Johnson sitting on the plane, he's singing back to that moment, that speech, that analogy. And he realized, hey, we're in the sunshine right now. Like, we are so far removed from what we once were. We're in calm waters. We got a good thing going here. Why leave? And that was kind of when it hit him. Like, I need to stay here. I need to kind of see this through. He's a guy, I think he had only made the playoffs one other time in his career before last year. So he had been in those waters like for a while. And so you get a taste of that sunshine. You don't want to leave, man. That's kind of what it boiled down to for him. So he kind of made that decision then and there. He wanted to just sleep on it and talk to his family and whatnot. But I think his mind was pretty much made up at that point on the plane ride back, saying like, we got unfinished business. And it's kind of what he told players, a couple of days later when he had finally reached that decision. So
yeah,
he's back for another year, and the Lions are sure happy to have him.
Yeah, this decision is really interesting, and I love it a lot, and I know a lot of other people do, but it's also one that's not for everybody. Like, it's not one that I don't think we could say, like, for instance, when the Lions hired Campbell, I remember saying to Chris, I was like, man, I hope this is a trend, the good guy hire, and it kind of, we've seen some of that, right? It's like, that's a trend.
Yep.
That became a trend. People are trying to copy some of what Dan Campbell did. Not sure if this will be a trend, not just because I don't know if Ben Johnson will be good enough to back it up. I think, for all we know, he will be. He'll be fine. But like, everybody's in their own situation in life. Everybody has their own goal. Everybody has their own, like, Aaron Glenn wants to be a head coach. Very vocal about that. Like, at this point in his life, after having played in the NFL for, 15 years, whatever it was, having been a scout, a coach, an assistant, all this, he wants to be a head coach. That's where he's at in his life. That's his priority, and there's really nothing wrong with that at all. For a guy like Ben Johnson, when you look at his context, it's so different than not just Aaron Glenn, but a lot of other guys. And his football context, even. He was at Carolina. He was a backup quarterback who was a math student who wasn't going to do football, but just like kept, hanging around, was so smart. They were like, you should try coaching. Okay, I'll try coaching. And then, like you say, Colton, he gets into the NFL. Then you realize that the thing that everybody realizes is that like 90% of the time that you're in the NFL, you're losing and you suck. And the team that you're on isn't good, going nowhere. And it's like, if you've never won and never done anything and never been anywhere really, right? Like, and you know that you're going to go have to start over again. That's a tough thing. That's a really tough thing. How many coaches have we seen over the years, particularly in college, I would argue, do that? They jump because they're like, I have to. I don't have a choice. I got to do it. And then it's just a disaster. It's a disaster. You look back 3 years, you're like, he should have turned it down and stayed there and wrote it out. It would have been way better, right?
Yeah.
Like, and people are afraid to do that. And like I said, it's not for everybody, but I think it's amazing that a guy has the self-confidence, whatever, he's honest with himself and what he wants to do that. And that's awesome, the whole thing, whether it works out or not. Frankly, I think that that's awesome that he was able to make that decision twice, especially this time when the pressure really was on him here.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too is like he realizes he has some leverage here. You know, like I think a lot of hotshot coordinators think they have to take the first job that comes their way, and Johnson isn't really thinking that way. Like when he does eventually take a head coaching job, and I believe he will, he wants it to be the perfect situation. One thing he mentioned on Thursday was just sort of the, looking around the landscape. Okay, there are 8 head coaching opportunities this offseason.
Right.
8 different coaches were hired. He said, how many of those guys will still have a job a few years from now? He set the over-under at like 3.5, 4.5.
Yeah, okay.
He's like, probably 3 guys will still have head coaching jobs.
Let's just be real.
From that team, like 3 years from now.
Right.
So he's trying to set himself up to get that second contract. What Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes just got this offseason, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the best scenario for that? It's a good relationship with ownership. Your front office has to be aligned with what you're looking for. He wants to be a play caller still, so you have to have an organization that's willing to have a head coach and have that relationship as well. And he just didn't see that on the market this offseason, at least like with the opportunities that were available. So like, why force it with a franchise that you're not totally sold on, that you don't think can get you that second contract based on where things are, and that you'll be out of a job in 3 years, right? So he's thinking long term, and I have to give him credit for that, because not a lot of coordinators will do that. So many coaches are all about climbing the ladder. What's next? How can I advance my career? And Ben Johnson's thinking differently. He's like, my family loves it here. We have a chance to win in a city that hasn't won. And I like my job. I like my boss, right? That's the other factor here. Dan Campbell is a guy that people want to work for. That's not always the case elsewhere. So, he's got everything he needs in Detroit, he feels like, to help this team win. And like, if there's not a perfect situation elsewhere, he's not going to leave. He's going to stay in the sunshine a little bit longer.
I will also say this, having talked to 1,000 offensive coordinators in my life, if you're a play caller who is not out of his play caller phase yet, we'll say, you should not leave, because a head coach and an offensive coordinator, those people do very different jobs. It is not the same thing. It's not even close. I remember, there's so many over the years, guys that had chances to be coordinators and just didn't do it because they were like, I don't want to do it. I'll just be an offensive coordinator over 100 places, whoever, be a vagabond, and I want to call plays forever. I'm not saying that's what Ben Johnson wants to do, but the headspace is incredibly different. Like, you're so focused on the puzzle and pieces of the game as a play caller, and really all the other stuff that a head coach literally has to do to keep his job, all the personnel things, all the emotional decisions, all the little things that really are what make a team go. You don't have to do any of that. It's like being a college coach and not having to recruit. It's like, I don't have to do any of this shit. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. When my quarterback's mad, he can come to me and vent. He's not mad at me. He comes to me and vents. Like, this is a pretty good situation. Plus, like you said, we're winning, and I am looked at as a huge part of that. I have leverage. They're paying me probably like he's probably one of, if not the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL right now, I would imagine, right? Like, sometimes guys make this way too difficult, and they jump before they're ready, because they think that because this is a football mentality, if I don't attack this thing like I'm the man, then who the hell am I anyway? And that's bullshit. That's not any way to attack anything. That's so old and dumb. Focus on where you're at, what you think you are and are not capable of in the current moment, and be okay with that. And I feel like that's what happened here. Long and short of it, I feel like if in an honest moment, Ben Johnson probably tell you, I don't know if I was ready to do that too, and I don't know if he was. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's fine for everybody involved there. You know what I mean? Saves everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I think the self-awareness in Ben Johnson is
off the charts.
Off the charts, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is a guy that realized he had a good situation and was not going to leave for something that he doesn't think will be just as good in a couple of years from now, right? So, like, you have to tip your hat to that. I mean, like, I respect it a ton. That's just me personally. Like, a lot of guys in his position would take that job. and you might get fired 3 years from now, and you're just back to square one and wondering where you can work, right? So,
Yeah.
I think it worked out for him. I do think he'll be a head coach one day. And maybe this extra year will help him, right? Like,
Sure.
the thing
Who
with Ben
knows?
Johnson that we know is he's this brilliant offensive mind. There have been so many guys labeled as the next big OC, the brilliant offensive mind, the next great head coach, right? But they have fizzled out after a few years because they didn't know how to lead a group of men. And now you get to continue learning from one of the best leaders of men in the NFL for another year.
Exactly.
Maybe go win a ring in the process. Like, not a bad gig, Like, that's good work.